Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you all can clearly hear me. If it's not the case, just feel free to send me a message using the chat box. And I'll quickly deliver the information session first, and then I'll give you guys some time for any questions and answers you may have. And thank you again for joining this session during your Friday afternoon. And without wasting any more time, I'll quickly start this. So anyone who want to join can continue to join us during the session. And I'll quickly go to the first slide. It's about our firm. I know some of you are here. You have probably came from came through personal references. But for those who don't know about us, we've been operating for the past 14 years in Sri Lanka. And we are we're certainly one of the first couple of firms in Sri Lanka to promote higher education in Sweden as a profit-oriented business, and certainly the first in Sri Lanka to promote higher education in Finland. And up to date, we have about more than ₹1 billion worth of scholarships under our belt. And the last time we checked, we have processed over 1,700 Sri Lankan nationals um, who are currently living in the Scandinavian countries, mostly in Sweden and Finland. And we also have processed some students in the past for countries like Norway, and even a couple of them for Iceland. So that's a bit about us. And very purpose of having an information session of this sort is to explain you a bit about what exactly you should prepare for if you're planning on applying for next autumn, that is 2025. Because we have noticed over the last 2, 3 years, the rules have been changing continuously from year to year. An example, last year, until last year, Sweden allowed anyone with a bachelor's degree obtained from a Sri Lankan university in English medium to apply for all these master's options without having any English proficiency test score. But it's not the case anymore. They have now imposed a newer requirement where you have to take up an English proficiency test score, like IELTS or even PTE is acceptable. The only other provision they have is if you have completed your general English as a subject at GCA levels and passed that subject, then you can apply without having an English proficiency score. This is for Sweden. For Finland, the IELTS or PT requirement has been there for a very long time now. We only process our applicants nowadays for research universities. There's 9 of them. And out of these 9 universities, at least for 6 universities, 6 to 7, you need a formal English proficiency test score. It can be IELTS or PT. So we need to share this information with you. I know most of you nowadays, you may have access to other information as well. You may have watched several YouTube videos, um, you know, blogs and blogs to have this information. But those who are planning on applying through us, we want to share you our side of the story and the requirements we want you to have, um, so we can try our level best to see a possible and productive end result next year. That's the very purpose of conducting this information session. And I'll quickly start now. So I already explained who we are. Most of you may know about us, those especially those who have came through references. Um, but there's something I missed to inform you during the previous slide. It is about the fact that we only process a limited number of applicants, usually 50 to 60 max, and there's a reason for that. Even I personally, I would like to process them in, thousands, but it's not the case for these countries. Even about a couple of years back, I still remember there was a comment in our Facebook page when we published this post saying we have stopped accepting new applications. There's this comment saying, so are you guys are the only ones to process applicants for Sweden? I think it's far worse than that. Um, do you guys think Europe is going to stop accepting Sri Lankan applicants or something along that line? But the real reason is, if you are familiar with the process of applying for these countries by now, you may understand. If we take a country like Finland, they only have 2 weeks application period for most universities, most research universities at least. And there's about 3 or 4 research universities and where they have the application period for 4 weeks. That's it, 2 to 4 weeks max. And regardless of the number of applicants we accept, there's always a limit of applications we can handle during that short time period. And that is the very reason why we always recruit new applicants months in advance. So it gives us some room to prepare all the documents required. And it also allows the applicant to have some time to fulfill their English proficiency requirements. So we can try together to see a productive outcome, which is a positive outcome with regard to the visa. And we also try our level best always to secure at least a partial scholarship of some kind, because it will not only save millions worth of money, at the same time, it will give you an increased level of safety in terms of paying your tuition fees. Because imagine you have to pay 1 million rupees for something and you end up paying half of that. Paying half of that is always better compared to you working so hard to pay or recoup 1 million rupees. That's the idea behind it. And that's the very reason why we accept a limited number of applications. And if you're planning on applying through us, you can start applying from the first day of June this year. So let's understand about the requirements to apply for a scholarship. Generally, if you have any intention to at least increase your chances of applying for a scholarship, you should have a class for your bachelor's. It's not always the case, especially for a university level scholarship. You need a class. They will probably look at your academic merits. And there's also other types of scholarship, such as the ones from Swedish Institute, which is purely based on work and leadership. So there's 2 categories of scholarship. But if you're planning on applying for university level scholarships, you may have to have a class for your bachelor's. Whereas if you have any kind of leadership experience, you can try to apply for scholarships such as the Swedish Institute one, where the evaluation is done based on the leadership experience. So end of the day, we apply for all possible scholarships. We love scholarships. In fact, we want to, continue to have a good record in that aspect. So whatever you're eligible for, we'll apply for all that. But the general requirement, especially if you are targeting a scholarship, at least a partial one, is to have a class for your bachelor's. And then comes the IELTS requirement or PT requirement. For Sweden, as of today, the general requirement is to apply for a master's is to have a bachelor's degree plus an English proficiency test score. As I explained before, there's one provision there. If you have passed your general English as a subject during your A levels with at least S pass, you can still apply for most of the options without having an English proficiency test score. But the issue there is to apply for Finland, which is something we do together because our process always works simultaneous. We apply for Sweden and Finland together at the same time. Usually 4 different options from Sweden and 4 different options from Finland. So it allows us to apply for 8 master's options together, which creates 1 out of 8 probability to be able to secure a scholarship of some kind. In a worst case possible scenario, you are still likely to be able to receive an admission for a fee paying program. Let's talk about it a bit later. So the general requirement is to have a bachelor's with a class. If you have it, the better. The right IELTS score or PT score for most options, if IELTS is required, the requirement is to have an IELTS score of 6.5 is 6 for each component. If it's PTE, the requirement is often 62 for each component. That's the general requirement. It can be vary from one university to another, but the general requirement is 6.5 is 6 for when it comes to IELTS. If it's PTE, 62 for each component. And then the third one is you have to pay a tuition fee if in case if you are admitted without any kind of a scholarship. The whole point is generally in these countries you need to allocate at least good 10,000 euros nowadays if you are paying the complete tuition fees, at least 10,000 euros. It can be a little bit less or more. There are universities where the tuition fee range is around 8,000, and it could also be around 15,000 for some universities. But if you take or if you consider an average, it's around 10,000 euros, which comes to about 3.5 million rupees. My recommendation is if you are to pay a tuition fee, you must be able to at least pay for the entire first year, 3.5 or a little bit less or more, depending on the university, but you have to be able to pay for the first year. It's an absolute must because most of these countries, again, are very kind of generous options, especially countries like Finland and even Sweden. If you come from a technical or ICT related background, these are generally safe options. You can probably go there, study something, and then try to secure a work permit or at least an admission for a PhD or something in the long run. Still perfectly possible for the most. But the real issue with these countries is if anyone expect to find a job within the first month and pay the remaining semester by working there during the first 6 months, I don't think it'll be possible because with the language barriers they have, it might take you at least good 4, 5, 6 months sometimes to find that first job offer. So you have to be able to prepare for that. And one critical requirement because of that issue is to be prepared for the first year at least. And then the next one is applicable only for management graduates. If you're planning on applying for anything related to business, can be international business, finance, or accountants, or marketing, or anything in that line, I recommend you to take up the test GMAT because it gives you the ability to apply for some options. GMAT options, that requires you to have GMAT as a compulsory requirement. There are some universities like Aalto University in Finland and University of Oulu for some programs. GMAT nowadays is a compulsory requirement. You should have it if you're planning on applying for any of the relevant programs. For Sweden, it remains an optional requirement, but still to apply for universities like Uppsala University or University of Gothenburg or even Umeå University for some options, they expect you to have a GMAT score. It works in a way, Group 1 is based purely on GMAT score. If you have GMAT, you have higher chances to get in. And then only the ones with academic merits will be considered. Whereas for Finland, we have some universities already in place. They require you to have GMAT as a compulsory requirement if you are to apply. Anyway, this is applicable only for management graduates who are planning on applying for these GMAT required universities. The real life situation is, I'll put it this way, if you have a first class and a GMAT score and the right IELTS score, I think you will be among the top 2 or top 1% of Sri Lankan applicants in any particular year. If you have a first class and the IELTS score, then you are in the top 10-15%. So if you are planning on applying for a scholarship, if you have a first class and the right IELTS score, then spending some money on GMAT will be a good investment because you will definitely have good chances to be able to secure a scholarship of some kind. Anyway, still, it's not a compulsory requirement, but I recommend you to spend some money, especially if you have a first class or a second upper and the right IELTS or PET score in hand. The last one, I already explained this to a certain extent. You should have the ability to pay remaining tuition fees if admitted for a partial scholarship. The idea is, let's say, if you have to pay a full tuition fee, originally for, let's say, the amount is 10,000 euros. If you're admitted for a 50% scholarship, you still have to pay out of your pocket about 5,000 euros. And you must be able to pay this amount in full, at least for the first year, if you are expecting these options to become safer, and smoother ones. So let's move to the next slide real quick. I would like to start with the disadvantages. I think that are there. First one is obviously the language barrier issues. Pretty common in any of these European countries. You may not come across this issue when if you go to the UK or Ireland, but apart from that, for any other European country, they always have their own language. Hardly they do speak English. Most of them are bilinguals, yes, but hardly you will have any opportunity to find a job offer in most non-technical sectors without having any proficiency in the local language. So that's a concern you should have. But again, this is not applicable for some sectors, especially if you work in the software industry and move into one of these countries. I really don't think you will need any kind of proficiency in local languages because there's hundreds of Sri Lankans I know. Most of them are our clients and even some friends I have, you know, they have been able to find jobs in their industry without speaking a word of the local language. But again, it depends. It's better to, put in some efforts to learn the language, even if you're currently occupied in any of these technical sectors. Having said that, there are individuals who manage to find um, employment opportunities in these countries without speaking the local language. But I always recommend my applicants, anyone who planning on going into these countries, to work on the language requirement. They will need it at least in the long term. And the second one is also pretty basic. You all know about it, hopefully. It's about the harsh climate they have during most months of the year. That's something you have to be prepared for. No other option. And the third one is kind of outdated nowadays. But in the past, I have received complaints or feedback from my previous clients when they go into especially um, rural or regional towns about the fact that they're the only brown person they see around, which can be kind of a cultural shock to some. But with today's, because gone are the days when Sweden and Finland used to have a tiny number of Sri Lankans. Now the numbers, go there in thousands. So it doesn't matter anymore. But still, for some, they can be a kind of a cultural shock, especially during the first few weeks, at least. And the last one, we already spoke about it to a certain extent. Please do not expect to find a job overnight or in a couple of weeks or in a month if you are planning on moving to any of these countries. It can take several months sometimes to find your first job, especially if you do not have any ground level support that part of the world. But having said that, nowadays we come across many applicants. Like let's say for an example, I was speaking with one of my clients recently. She works in the software industry in Sri Lanka. I asked her whether if it is possible for her to work from home, and she said it's perfectly possible. So there are some Finnish and even Swedish towns where the average living expenses is around 1,000 euros, comes to about 330,000, 350,000 euros, and that's a pretty decent budget in some of the towns. And if you are an individual applicant, um, I think even half of this will be enough to survive in some of the towns, especially outside big cities. So if anyone has the opportunity to work from home rather than they trying to find a job is one of these areas, some kind of odd jobs. So always better to keep that professional occupation, work from home, complete the masters, and then make use of the post-study time period given to find a professional job offer in the country. That's one option you have, especially if your current job allows you to work from home. And the other possible scenario is if you are a married couple, kind of have increased security or an individual applicant because one always can work full time without any restrictions. There's no attachment to universities or any kind of studies. So that gives you some security. You can go out and try your level best to find that first offer. So, having said that, there can be difficulties in finding employment in the short run. So you have to be prepared and brace for the impact, I would say. So you should have some capital in hand, sufficient amount of money to pay for at least your first year, and also sufficient amount of money to cover up your living expenses at least for the first few months. It's an absolute must if you want these countries to become smoother options for migration. So let's now talk about the advantages. The first one, obviously, the biggest advantage I see is the fact that they offer plenty of scholarships, plenty of real scholarships. There's no 10%, 20%. I see some 20% nowadays, but these are like proper scholarships given with good intentions. The best example is Finland, until the year 2019, had an absolute free education system open to international students regardless of the level of studies. Even those who went to Finland prior to 2019 for bachelor's and master's both from Sri Lanka did not have to pay a single cent of rupees for education. The surprising fact is, even in the year of 2019, the number of Sri Lankans who moved from Sri Lanka to Finland is around less than 100. So the surprising thing that I don't understand is that the demand for these countries increased to thousands just in a couple of years' time. I really don't understand how it happened, but that's the stat. So the number of Sri Lankans moved to Finland from Sri Lanka in the year of 2019, the last year when they had a free education system, is below 100. But last year, I estimate the number to be in thousands, at least good 2,000 to 2,500. So that's the difference. So these universities are competitive than ever. We should know about it, and we have to prepare for that because you'll be competing with a whole lot of other Sri Lankans and other South Asians and other people from across the globe for a limited number of admissions. So we have to keep that in mind when you apply for these countries. The second biggest advantage I see is the fact that they offer plenty of social security benefits. One good example is if you have children, there's no any school fees involved for them in any of these countries. In the whole bunch of Scandinavian countries, education is offered free of charge from primary level up to the doctoral level, regardless of your visa. If you have a valid visa to be in the country for children, you don't have to pay anything. Even the daycare, for the daycare, the amount you pay is same as a local person, local or citizen of that country. That's something very interesting for me because there's only a very few countries in the world who actually offer similar benefits. And the third one is also still applicable. You can apply for a work permit even with an entry level kind of a job offer, theoretically. Before what, a couple of years back, Sweden used to have a salary requirement of 13,250 kroners. So basically, any full time job in Sweden paid more than that. So anyone who went to Sweden about 2, 3 years back, they were able to apply for a work permit, even with an entry-level kind of a job offer. I know hundreds of Sri Lankans, they managed to apply for their first work permit using cleaning jobs, which is not even something you can think of in most mainstream countries. But unfortunately, they increased that salary from 13,250 to somewhere around 27,000 range. So now still there's no any particular designation or professional occupation requirement, but no cleaning job will pay that much. So it's not an option anymore. But this is in Sweden. In Finland, they're still around the minimums. So you can find, as long as you find a job offer that pays you the minimum, slightly or minimum amount of requirement, you can apply for a work permit. I think these are probably the only two countries I know. Can be the same as most other European countries except the UK. They're very lenient on these requirements. I don't know if these things will change in future. I heard some rumors that Sweden is going to further increase that the 27,000 some figure to somewhere in the somewhere to some if I'm not mistaken about 32,000 or 33,000 around that range. But if you are involved in any of the technical occupations, engineering or um, ICT, I think even achieving a salary of that sort is not impossible. But those who want to consider going to Sweden for their masters in business management or something related to art, then you can be in a bit of a trouble, unless obviously your spouse comes from a technical background. But I'm not able to give you or confirm anyone anything. I recommend you to dig into this information further and then make an informed decision. If you have my understanding of moving to these countries is if you have the financial ability to pay for at least the first year and have sufficient funds for good 6, 7 months in the beginning, these countries can become some of the most safest options. That's one possible requirement you should have. The second one is if you do not have the financial capacity, you must be on a scholarship, a funded scholarship where at least some living expenses are covered. If you do not have any of these requirements met, if you are planning on taking a bank loan or something, merely to pay for that first semester and to cover the first couple of months living expenses, you can be in serious trouble. That's just my opinion about these options. So the fourth one is the fact that you can access accessible healthcare facilities, and again, most of these facilities are funded regardless of what visa you have compared to most other countries. And some countries like Finland, they require you to have an insurance policy that's applicable only for the student. Uh, but in general, all these countries allow you to access their healthcare system for lesser cost. And you, especially if you are hospitalized, the amount of money you pay will be a considerably lower amount compared to most other countries. That's also, I see that as an advantage. And we already covered the fifth point. Your children can have free education, including state-funded daycare facilities. And the cost of the daycare is exactly similar to what a citizen pays. It is true, even for private daycares, I've heard the amount of money you pay is around 50, 60 euro figure because the rest is paid by the government directly to the business, which is surprising because I personally I live in Australia. So I know here, if you come as a student with kids, the amount of money you pay for daycare can be enormous, at least like one third of the minimum wage. But then there are pros and cons to all options. So you have to evaluate everything before you make that final decision. And the other one is personally for me, it's very interesting. I learned this from one of my clients who happened to become a very good friend of mine lately. So all the vocational training in countries like Sweden is offered free of charge, again, regardless of the visa. But the requirement is you have to learn the Swedish language. So one way to do that is if you go in as the main applicant, and if your spouse is able to learn the Swedish language, which is again taught free of charge throughout the country. Sorry, they have these places called SFI, Swedish for Immigrant Centers, scattered throughout the country, where you can go and learn the language free of charge. If you learn the Swedish language up to a certain level called level D, my friend told me it will take at least good 8 to 9 months time to acquire that kind of a competency. So if you have this level D certificate, you can start learning or start engaging in Swedish vocational training in an area you like, free of charge. The advantage of doing that is all these vocational training opportunities are connected with public employment agencies, which means if you complete a particular vocational training, you'll be assisted by these employment agencies to find employment. So it's very interesting again, but you have to spend hours of time to learn the Swedish language first, acquire the level of fluency these vocational training authorities want you to have, and then work your way around it. But it's a good option. And the last one is pretty basic. All these Scandinavian countries, again, they have inclusive systems in place to absorb immigrants. And even I was surprised to learn one third of the Swedish population is actually born elsewhere. It's that multicultural nowadays. And but again, you have to obviously learn the language, learn the systems there, learn the processes there, try your level best to integrate to the mainstream society if you want to have a pleasant stay in the long run. So all that is up to you. I will quickly move to the next slide. It's about the things you should be concerned of. I already covered the first one. You must either be on a scholarship or have the ability to pay for at least the first 2 semesters. The second one is you should have sufficient funds to cover up your living expenses at least for the first 6 months. And the third one, already covered, you must be able to learn the local language because if you're planning on staying in these countries in the long run, language will become an utmost important requirement. The next one is to, is the advantage you have there, which is the ability to try securing a full-time job offer for the spouse. I've seen it happening over and over again, especially in countries like Finland. If the two of you go together as a husband and wife, while the main applicant is pursuing his or her master's, the other applicant, the secondary applicant or the spouse, could continue to try finding a job offer in the country. And if he or she can, you know, do that, then they're able to apply for a work permit or resident permit for the purpose of employment. The advantage of doing that is the moment you secure a work permit, it's almost similar to being settled in Finland or even Sweden because work permits will be can be renewed every year or every 2 years. And once you fulfill a specific time period, often it's about 45 months, you can apply for the permanent residency. So it's a clear-cut process. There's no skill migration or what do you call that, skill assessment requirements or anything of that sort. The requirement is to be on a work permit for a certain time period in these countries to apply for permanent residency. The last one is just a request I have. If you're planning on discontinuing your studies, the reason why you are there for, I recommend you to find a legal pathway before you discontinue it because your behavior in these countries will have a direct impact on the applicants who want to follow you. It has already happened now. These countries used to be some of the smoothest, most options in terms of securing a visa. We have had in the past, in 2010 and 2011, all the way up to like 2016, we had no refusals whatsoever at all, straight for 6, 7 years. But nowadays, even we receive some a tiny number of refusals, especially for countries like Sweden. Finland is still, we only have one negative case over the last 14 years, but Sweden, we receive quite a few number of refusals every year from 2016. Still, as a business, we can function because it's a tiny fraction of the total number of applicants, but still, from the applicant side, they have not been able to get their job done, which happens mainly because of the volume. The the more number of Sri Lankans apply for these countries, the more number of chances she'll have to have a refusal. But my personal opinion of that is, compared to most mainstream countries, these Scandinavian countries still remain some of the safest options out there. in terms of securing a resident permit. Let's quickly move to the next one. What the application process looks like through Eduzone. If you're planning on applying through us, it's a three-step process. There's an assessment process, actual application process, and the visa process. The assessment process is where we have to take certain documents from your hands, often the bachelor's degree cert, the transcript, and your passport copy. We also charge 35,000 Sri Lankan rupees as a commitment fee. Once you hand over these documents, we can spend some time between 7 to 14 days. We can come back to you with a list of options available for you to apply. That's the first step. We can give you the options available, the course contents, and the exact type of documents we need from your end to process you further. The second step is the actual application process. Once the assessment is completed, you can pick your options from our assessment outcome, four different options from Sweden, four different options from Finland. And there's something I forgot to inform you. If you are a husband and wife pair, we're both graduates, we only actually charge from one person. So even if the two of you apply through us together, we still charge you from one person. The advantage of applying together is the fact that we can apply for up to 16 options, 8 for the main applicant, 8 for the co-applicants. So that gives you 1 in 16 chances to be able to secure a scholarship, which is a very high kind of a probability. We love that if both of you are graduates, if both of you are able to take up your English proficiency test course, feel free to apply, and we'll still charge you from one person to encourage you from applying, because it also gives us better chances to increase our scholarship portfolio, because the more scholarship like we secure, the better for us. So the actual application process works in a way. Once we hand over the assessment outcome, you pick your options from there and then submit your documents required. And we also charge about 185,000 Sri Lankan rupees. I understand it's quite a bit of money, but then again, we offer anyone a placement guarantee for a fee paying option in case if no scholarship doesn't work. But if you, in case if we are not able to secure you an admission at all, then the amount of money you pay us, the entire 185,000, is completely refundable. Having said that, we, as I informed in the beginning, we only accept a limited number of applications, so we don't want to handle that many refunds. So sometimes, we most of the times we try our level best to ensure we accept only those we can actually process. The third step is the visa process. It depends from one country to another. But to give you a basic idea, it works in a way all these countries, Sweden and Finland especially, they have electronic visa processes. What you do is once you secure an admission, you can visit the relevant migration portal. For Sweden, it's called Swedish Migration Agency. That's the authority involved processing resident permits. In Finland, is the Finnish Migration Service. We can load the electronic application first online, and then you have to visit the embassy of Sweden or embassy of Finland in New Delhi at some point of time during the process, either to be interviewed or to provide your biometric details, your thumbprints and photograph. But most of the times it's a one-time in and out visit. If you plan your flights well, it's even possible to go in the morning and come out of the country in the afternoon. But I see no point doing that, because when you spend about 100,000 rupees for an air ticket, it's better to do some sightseeing rather than coming back on the same day. But those who want to do that still can be possible for these countries, because it's a one-time in and out visit most of the times. And you also have to pay a visa fee. Usually the amount of money at the moment you pay for Sweden is about 1,500 Swedish kroners per adult applicant, and half of that for a child. So 1,500 Swedish kroners is equivalent to about 45,000 Sri Lankan rupees. But for Sweden, it's much more expensive than that. For Sweden, you had to pay 350 euros for the main applicant, for the student. 470 euros for the co-applicant for spouse and 270 for per each child. So it's far more expensive than Sweden. An example for a family of three, I think the amount of money you pay as the visa fee is over 300,000 rupees for Finland. But still, it's one of the most smooth options I personally seen because of the salary requirements to apply for a work permit, because of the overall atmosphere of the country, because of where they stand in the Human Development Index. For all these reasons, if you can secure an admission with a scholarship, can be one of the best options out there. So that's about the visa process in short. And I also need to add some requirement into this, which is about proof of funds. When you apply for these countries, you need to maintain some kind of a bank balance. There's no history requirements as such. There can be some history requirements in websites and all that, but they hardly enforce it. But still, the easiest way to calculate the amount of money needed is to keep a figure 10,000 in mind. So if you are a single person who want to apply for a resident permit, you should have at least 10,000 euros. If you are a family of two, should have at least 20,000 or more. If you are a family of three, should have at least 30,000 now. Again, these are not the official exact figures. This is just an estimate of the amount of money you should have in your bank account when you apply for your visa, but these are valid figures. So always higher than the minimum requirement. So that gives you some kind of a buffer, uh, which again creates a safer environment to be able to successfully secure a resident permit. So that's about the visa process. And there's also something we didn't add here. If your visa is granted, we charge a commission. We call it a service charge from our students because our role here is to work as an independent contractor uh, to handle your applications. It's not like these countries go around the world appointing agents. There can be some official agents for few universities, but most universities, these are non-commercialized systems. So the way we handle our business is we function as a completely independent party representing your applications on behalf of you. So our service charges, in case if you secure a scholarship for at least 50% of the tuition fee value, we charge about 450,000 from the main applicant and extra 100,000 from spouse. In case if your scholarship value is less than 49%, or in case if you decide to go in as a fee paying applicant, the amount of money we charge is 350,000 from the main applicant and extra 100,000 from spouse. And we don't charge anything from children regardless of the number of them. So that's about our charges. I would like to talk a bit about the exact cost involved again to give you an idea about summary of these expenses. If you apply through us, you have to pay an assessment fee of 35,000 rupees. The application fee, again, if you go through us, is about 185,000. Visa fees involved is 1,500 Swedish kronors for Sweden for adult applicant, half of that for a child. For Finland, it's 350 for the main applicant, 470 euros for the co-applicant, and 270 for a child. And apart from that, we also charge a commission if you have a scholarship for at least 50% of tuition fee or more. The amount you pay us is 450,000 for the main applicant and extra 100,000 for your spouse. If you do not have a scholarship or if your scholarship value is less than 49%, the amount of money you pay us will be 350,000 for the main applicant and extra 100,000 for the spouse. And then you have to also spend some money for your air tickets, and there'll be two air tickets involved. One is to go to the point of contact in New Delhi, the Embassy of Sweden, or the VFS Application Center for Finland in New Delhi. And nowadays, the air ticket prices will be somewhere around 100,000. But again, I'm very scared to give you final figures because later on, it could backfire on me saying, oh, this is what you quoted previously. But on average, It's about 100,000 rupees for a return ticket nowadays to New Delhi. And also, there's the need of buying an air ticket for the major destination, can be Stockholm or Helsinki. And I think for you can fly one way when you have a resident permit, but even a one-way ticket nowadays will cost you over 200,000 most of the times, as far as I know. So you have to consider these figures. There will be two air ticket requirement: one to go to the embassy in New Delhi, and the other to visit the major destination. Can be Helsinki or Stockholm or anywhere else. And also there are other expenses, as I quoted in the very beginning. You have to think about your tuition fees, at least the first year of it, and your living expenses for the first 6 months. And you also need to think of your accommodation, the amount of money you pay for your accommodation. My estimate is to have at least like 300,000 rupees every month for the first 6 months. And that's a kind of a relatively safer budget that covers most of the basic expenses like your accommodation and food, but still it's a minimal budget. So the amount of money you need to have for the first 6 months will be somewhere around 1.8 million on the minimum, apart from the tuition fee. So the next one is about the residential pathways. I know most of us, when we migrate, regardless of the visa, whether it's a student visa or work permit or for PhD, the end result we want to see is to be able to apply for permanent residency. In Sweden or Finland, there can be many other avenues you can reach the same destination, but I'm going to talk about two major options you have. One is to apply for a work permit. I think I already explained this. If you or your spouse secure a work permit in Sweden or Finland, the, the general requirement is to live in the country for a certain time period. Often it's about 45 months. Once you fulfill the residential requirement, you can apply for permanent residency. The second one is the doctoral studies pathway. Generally, as most of you may already know, applying for a PhD, if you are able to secure an offer for a PhD, is exactly similar to an employment contract. You'll be paid a stipend, a reasonable one, and because of the fact that you receive a monthly stipend, you'll be able to apply for a work permit. So whoever applies for a resident permit to complete a PhD will receive a work permit. So it automatically fulfills the residential requirement for permanent residency because it will take you at least good 3 to 4 years, mostly 4 years or more, to complete your doctoral program in these countries. So by the time of completion, you'll be ready to apply for PRA. Sweden, in fact, they even had at least until very recent, they had a pathway that explains if you have a doctoral program completed in Sweden, you can apply for permanent residency right away without any waiting time period. They had it mentioned in their migration policies. I'm not sure if it continue to exist or anymore, but theoretically, when you have a work permit issued for the purpose of completing a PhD, you are highly likely to be able to fulfill the residential requirement by the time you complete your studies. So these two are the major pathways I can suggest for you to become permanent residents. There can be other options as well. For an example, in Sweden, I'm not sure about the figures, so I'm not going to quote anything, but there's also a third possibility. If you run a business for some time period, if I'm not mistaken, for about 2 years' time, and create at least one employment opportunity, you can still be granted permanent residency when you renew your visa for the third year. So there can be other pathways as well. It's all out there for you to find out. But mainly, the major, most options Sri Lankans generally use to live in these countries in the long run is to apply for the permanent residency after fulfilling the time period required based on their work permit. The second one, the most competitive one, but the most safest one, is to somehow secure an offer for PhD because it gives you guaranteed permanent residency uh, in these countries because it takes at least good 4 years to complete them in the first place. So that's about it. I would like to take in any questions if you have any. I can suggest you two ways to do that. One is you can use the chat box, just type it and I'll answer. Second one is you can ask the question directly, um, verbally. Uh, yeah, any questions? Anyone?
Hello, Chamalka. I have a question.
Okay. Yes, go ahead,
So
Miss
my
Moni.
yes, so my question is, let's say I am the main applicant, right? And I apply for it, and I already have like a work from home setup.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to study and work at the same time, let's say my current company is already okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and let's say if I can somehow accommodate my work while I'm studying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that an issue with this?
Perfectly possible as long as your work does not interfere with your current studies or your ongoing studies.
Huh?
You are all in safe hands. Doesn't matter.
Uh, Mainly I'm asking because are there any like restrictions as in like students can only work for certain hours, things like that?
Not the case. If it's online, well, I'll answer it this way. In Sweden, there's no restrictions at all officially because it's one of the two countries I know in the world at the master's level or even at the bachelor's level. The main applicant and co-applicant both have no restrictions whatsoever. So officially, you can even declare and work. Doesn't matter. I'm not sure about the taxes though. But in Finland, there's a 30-hour requirement. The main applicant is only allowed to work for 30 hours. But that is, again, if you work for a tax-paying job in Finland. So if it's online, as long as you get paid into your Sri Lankan bank account, as long as you work from home, I think you'll be perfectly safe.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, Chamalka, for answering
Nice.
that. Actually, uh, yeah, that's all for now. I do have another
Sure.
question I forgot.
It's all
Let me
right.
recall.
Just feel free to contact us. I think I'll give you my number after the conversation, after the end of the session. So you can feel free to contact us, or even come see us after 1st of June. Will do.
Okay, okay. Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Chamalka. I recall
Thank you.
what was my other question is.
Okay. What is
Uh,
it?
Yeah, so you mentioned that one of the ways to secure a scholarship would be to have a first class. Actually, in my case, I don't have a first class. I have a second class upper, but you mentioned the other way would be to show some kind of a leadership experience, right? So in
Yeah.
this case, right, how would I actually prove it, like during my application process?
Well, first of all, having a second upper is still good, and you still have good chances to be able to secure a scholarship of some kind.
Okay.
It doesn't work in a way like simply because you have a first class. If you had one, you will receive a scholarship. It has some other roles as well. For an example, how good your statement of purpose is, how good you have presented your documents, and how good the relevancy of your bachelor's and the master's you're going to apply gel together, all these. So you don't have to worry about having a second upper because still second upper is considered good. But the answer to your other question is about the SI scholarship. It's based on leadership experience. So leadership experience needs to be proven by completing very scholarship specific documents that they have. So every year they will release these documents. I think you can even have go and have a look at it now if you want to. Where they you for an example, if you are to apply for a scholarship, you have to get this document filled up in a certain manner and get your employer, or if we, for an example, if you're working for any um, any entity, non-governmental organization, or any public-related or state-related, not-for-profit kind of an entity, you can ask them to fill the document and sign it on behalf of you, or sign it saying that you have worked there for this many hours. Then you can apply for the scholarship. So they have a very scholarship specific document set to be organized, and we can guide you with that. That is if you have any leadership experience in the first place. But
Okay,
anyways,
okay.
just
So,
one possibility. SI is one possibility and it's highly competitive. For example, this year we have nine SI scholarship holders for Sri Lanka, and we happen to have two out of nine. Still good. I'm still happy because those are fully funded scholarships. Each um, scholar is valued at over 15 million. It's just one probability. You have better chances to secure a university level scholarship with a second upper.
okay, okay. That's actually great to hear. So,
No.
basically, okay, I have both options, either
Mhm.
the class, the degree class, or the leadership. In the leadership case, all I need to do is get us get certain application filled by my employer, right?
Yeah,
That
exactly. So they
that
have a specific format to follow. As long as we follow the format, we can apply.
Okay, okay, okay. Thank you so much
We'll
for
guide you
sharing that.
throughout. No worries. Thank you, Mr.
All
Mali.
right.
Anything else? Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Jamalka.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Mr. Jamalka.
Hello.
Can
Yes,
you
how
hear
may I
me?
help you? Yeah, I can very clearly.
Yeah, Mr. Jamalka, I have one question.
Mhm.
Thing is, actually, my wife already she has completed master with
Uh-huh.
the first class. The
Okay.
GPA was out of 4, 3.96.
Mm-hmm.
In this scenario, is there any possibility to apply her again masters, or
Mm-hmm.
can we proceed with the PhD with you?
Well, you cannot proceed with a PhD through us. The reason is
Yeah.
the general application process for a PhD is completely different. To give you an idea, if you have completed your bachelor's and master's together, you can theoretically apply for a PhD, but it works in a way, it's going to be extremely competitive compared to applying for a master's. So if you are to apply, you better find the websites of these universities directly. Like for an example, if you do a simple Google search about
Yes.
list of universities in Sweden, you get the entire list. And then you can visit the employment page in these websites. Employment can be titled employment, or it can be titled careers, or work with us, or anything in that line. They
Okay.
usually publish their PhD studentships in this particular page. There you can find out if you fulfill the requirements to apply, or if you share similar research interests. If
Yes.
you do, you can continue to follow the guidelines or follow the instructions. That's the way to do that. As a third
Yeah.
party, there's little to
Yeah.
nothing we can do with regard to PhDs. But if you fulfill the basic requirements, I recommend you to directly apply. Not only apply, the successful most method to secure a PhD offer is to apply for multiple options. You can sit somewhere, spend some time, take some time, let's say 3 to 6 months, sometimes even 1 year, continue
Yes.
to apply for multiple options, let's say at least good 30 to 40 or at least 30 different opportunities over a span
Yes.
of 6 months, let's say, then you have a very high probability to secure an offer. That's the way
Yeah.
it's been done by all the successful applicants. If you because when you say PhD nowadays, we have two pathways to get it done, right? We have the academic research oriented path, the regular pathways, and there's a
Yes.
all I have seen in Sri Lanka and most countries where education is kind of a commercialized industry. You also have the
Yes.
option to pay a tuition fee and complete a PhD, which is uh, which is easy to get in, but in terms of the overall quality, I don't think it'll be
Yes.
the same.
Yes, no, clear, Mr. Tamata. Another one is actually, let's assume that if we again proceed with the masters for the trying for the scholarship, is
That's
there
possible.
any possibility? It's possible, no?
Yeah, perfectly
Yeah,
possible.
because
In fact, we have
yeah,
at least good 20-30% of our applicants, they already have at least one master's. So it
okay,
doesn't
okay,
matter. So you can
okay,
still apply for a master's. If that is the
yes,
case, we can certainly help you out because the process is crystal clear. If you have the minimal
yes,
requirements, we can then
yes.
handle the application process, and you are highly likely to be able to secure an offer too at the same time.
Yeah, actually, it's clear, Mr. Tamata, because
All right.
already we are having some publication also,
Uh-huh.
so we
Then
will
yeah,
proceed
we
with
can, we
the
can
information.
use all that to increase your
Yes,
chances to
yes,
secure a scholarship. Like even if you decide to apply on your own, my only recommendation is to apply for multiple options. The more you apply, the higher chances you
yes,
have to secure a scholarship.
yes. Clear. Thank you very much.
Nice. Thank you, Mr. Dinesh. Anyone else?
When exactly is the next intake, Chamalka, like in 2024, like around?
Well, there's only one major intake every autumn, every August. So you have a supplementary intake in the month of January, but then again, we don't handle any applications for that intake because the number of options you have is very limited. For example, in Sweden, you only have about 6 to 7 masters available. In Finland, there can be about 5 to 6, maximum 10 masters available at research universities. So there's no point of giving anyone hopes about being able to secure an admission for the this supplement intake. So we only process applicants for the major intake every August. If you are to go through us, we will start accepting new applications from the first day of June. That's like in a couple of weeks time, and that way we can ensure we have plenty of time to organize all the requirements. Plus, you also have some time to fulfill your English proficiency requirements. And if we do everything on time, we're likely to be able to see a very positive outcome. So that's the timeline. If you apply on time between 15th March to 15th April, you can receive admission decisions for all these countries, for most of the universities. Pick the best one and start the visa process.
So approximately, we should be able to go if everything goes well. We should be able to migrate by, I mean, so to go there by 2025 August, isn't it?
Exactly, first day of August or afterwards. So it's an year-long process for the most, but a smooth one at that because we have plenty of time if we get hold of all the requirements on time. Around between mid-March to mid-April, we can have the admission decisions, initiate the visa process thereafter, and receive the visa outcomes around this time of next year, and initiate the journey. Or no, after 1st of August. That's the timeline.
Okay, okay.
All
Maybe
right.
one last question. Sorry, I
Uh-huh.
asked too many questions, but one last
Yeah, no,
one.
it's all right. Yeah.
Uh, So, in case if my, let's say if the primary applicant go for study, right? And how many years do we get? I mean, for the spouse, right? How many years they get for for their work visa?
Well, are you working in the software industry?
Yes.
If that's the case, I think these are some, especially Sweden. They have one of the most strongest industries out there. I think the in general, Sweden has a stronger ICT industry compared to even some of the mainstream options, like New Zealand, for example. I think I'm not sure about it, but it's just my gut feeling because in Sri Lanka alone, I can think of at least 6 or more Swedish companies operating in Sri Lanka. That's how strong the industry is. So if you are involved in the software industry, I think you have very good chances to secure a job offer And to do that, you have 2 years of time anyways. And if it's not good enough, you get another year in Sweden, another 2 years in Finland. But I don't think you need that many months because out of all our applicants, those who are involved in the software industry tends to find jobs faster than anyone else.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, Amakar. Thank
No
you.
worries. Thank you. Anyone else? All righty. So I hope that's all we have for today. If you have any questions, you can still ask me. I'll quickly move to the next slide. If you need to contact us, you can feel free to come see us after 1st of June, but please message us before you come. You can message Ravish using the number 0762803838 or WhatsApp me using the second number 0715607333. So that's a WhatsApp only number. Feel free to send me a message if you have any questions. I recommend you guys to work on your IELTS, OPT, because I have this feeling, even for Sweden, English proficiency, having some kind of an English proficiency test score will become a compulsory requirement very soon. It may happen this year, or it may happen in another 2, 3 years time, but eventually, I have a feeling it will happen for sure. So it's better to be prepared rather than waiting for the last minute. So other than that, I think you had at least a tiny bit of understanding about our process during today's meeting. And thank you again for joining us during your Friday afternoon. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. If you want to come see us, you can do it after 1st of June. And thank you.